Welcome back to Producer's Toolbox. I'm your host, Carol Adrian, and today we are addressing writers. Despite the fact that we're all television, film, other arts, writing, the purveyors and innovators of the written word have a very basic place in most of the other arts and endeavors. Who doesn't take notes, make an outline, something like that? And almost everybody I have ever met has felt they've got a book in them. Well, I turned out to have a book in me, which was a surprise, little shameless self-promotion. This is my book that came out in 2022, Healing a Divided Nation. And having never written a book before, I'm a filmmaker. I was puzzled about, well, what happens once you've written the thing, gotten the illustrations, agreed on the cover? How do other people find out about your wonderful book? So, to my surprise, my book was reviewed in Time Magazine and Library Journal, and I got invited to speak about it at the Smithsonian, the U.S. Capitol, Gettysburg. How does this magic happen? Because Book Publicists. They are literary magicians, and we have two really wonderful book publicists today. We have Julia Romero from Pegasus Books Limited in New York and London, and she is the publicist for my book. That's how I met Julia, who has done a wonderful job arranging all these things. And then an old friend, Jessie Glenn, who is the director of Mindbucks Media Book Publicity in Portland, Oregon. And now Julia deals with the in-house books of the publisher Pegasus, and Jessie deals with a variety of publishers who don't necessarily have a publicist on staff, if I'm correct.
So with in-house publicists too, yeah.
An in-house, okay. So both in-house and out of house, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So you don't necessarily have to have a publisher to have a publicist. Is that accurate?
I think there are some publicists who work without publishers. We work with authors with publishers. But yeah, there's a vast experience. It is difficult for self-published books because it's harder to find coverage for them. So so we tend to work with publishers who are small, medium, or large. With large publishers like Pegasus will work alongside someone like Julia, and their team tends to dovetail really well with ours. We just throw a lot of more extra hours towards a book. Julia, I don't know if you work sometimes with external publicists, but it's usually really fun for us.
Well, let's talk a little about, let me get both of your perspectives on what can a publicist do for an author? Julia, you want to come in on this one too?
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me, Carol. It's awesome to talk about publicity and, share the knowledge. Because I definitely think it's something that we should be kind of talking about a little bit more and how it works. But yeah, to your question of kind of what can a publicist do for an author, I think being an in-house publicist, so that means I work at Pegasus Books Publishing. I work directly with the authors that we publish at Pegasus. My job and publicist's job is to kind of really help support a author's book as well as an author's ideas in terms of, if an author really wants to do an event somewhere specific, as a publicist, our job is to kind of really navigate that for them and also be an advocate to the author. So, we're the ones who are reaching out on their behalf to everyone. So it's journalists, reviewers, editors, event coordinators, all of these kind of people that the author might not have access to. We can kind of go on their behalf or email on their behalf and share the book with them. And hopefully that, we can connect the author with these media organizations and, we can then work together to promote the book.
You really
And
like
yeah,
the introductions, don't you?
yeah, I think that's a good way to kind of phrase it, as a way to bring people together, and make relationships work. And yeah.
Oh, what's it look like from your side, Jesse?
It's very similar. As the director, my main day-to-day job is acquisition. So sadly, a lot of what I do is saying no to people, which is kind of a bummer, but getting the right fit for us is really important. So once we have a book that feels like it's going to be a right fit, and the right fit usually means that we know that we can probably get coverage for the book. It's very similar to what Julie is saying. I would say, one thing that a publicist can do for an author is we send people these sadistic questionnaires that probably, Julia, you do too, but pages and pages and pages of who do you know, where have you worked, where have you lived. So trying to find all those cross sections between, the regional ties that an author might have, the genre, back searching all the comparative books, which are like books that have a similar audience, similar themes, trying to, find out the author's hobbies. And when we really find a good fit is when, say we have an author who is a woman vet who loves, veteran who loves yoga and wrote a spy novel. We're going to really shine when we find people who hit 2 or 3 out of 5 of our categories. That's when we're like, oh, this is perfect. So for our company, we have Julie mentioned events. For us, events are separate from publicity, is separate from social media, is separate from merch. So we'll do all of these different things. There's a different team that works on them, but we all work together as well. So we'll also do, for example, we'll take over the social media for our authors and just write it for them and then optimize it and work on doing all the engagement for them, because authors tend to hate social media, which I find completely understandable. It is such a pain. But then for events, that's also sort of a separate team, but they coordinate with the publicity team. So, what we want really is for, the author to win some awards, which we then can hype through the publicity team. We want the social media people to be seeing maybe some outreach requests that are happening in real time. We'll sometimes see Publishers Weekly is looking for a whole bunch of YA books for 3 months out, send them. And we wouldn't see that if we weren't also following those accounts. So then this, they'll throw that to the publicity team, or the publicity team will throw out to the social media team, can you head up this person that might or might not give a blurb, so that we can soft pitch them first before we then pitch them afterwards. So we are able to kind of time out everything, and that is really useful. So yeah, I'd say I think what's nice about being a publicist from an individual company is we probably have more hours per author than Julia does. Julia's got probably an awesome set list of places that cover books from Pegasus, which is rad. We have that within our company too, but it's going to be a different type of list, but we probably have more hours per author, which is kind of nice because there's no leaf we don't turn over. And that's when it's really fun working with an in-house team, because for us, we have the in-house team working on their dedicated contacts. And then we do all the stuff reach out to even, alumni magazines and things like that, which, you don't always get to with fewer hours. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Because now, Julia, when Julia called me and said, well, the Smithsonian wants to talk to you and Time Magazine wants to print an excerpt. And I was lightheaded for 3 days from that. But I thought, I could never have called them up and said, oh, hello, I have a book. That was because you knew them and knew what they wanted. How did that happen? Magically.
Yeah, no, I think, what Jesse was kind of talking about of this kind of list, kind of media master list of the people that Pegasus has worked with in the past. So this is people who we form relationships with, people that we know their interests, we know what they like, we know the genres. Specifically with Time, it was a digital editor, so someone who only works digitally, so they're not printing anything in the print issues. They're not working in that space. I knew that she was interested in, a history book. She's interested in these kind of more, not well-known stories, American stories. She really likes the hero angle. So something, inspiring. So I knew that would be a great fit for your book, Carol, because that kind of hits, like Jesse was saying, all of these points. It checks off all these things. So, and coming from a publicist, these people know that publicists are going to pitch them. That's kind of the landscape is publicists are coming to them with ideas. They're less enthusiastic about authors coming to them directly, or they're less receptive. I think with the publicist, there's a, kind of a second person there to kind of help, like I was saying earlier, with the liaison of it all and trying to be the advocate. So, yeah. And, we have our, also publicists have databases that, a bunch of kind of emails that we bring together and, either internally or externally,
there's
compile.
Too. So there's Cision, there's all these other things.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. That you have to kind of pay for those databases, but those are tools we use too. It's a lot of just research too. It's a lot of like finding the best way to get this person's contact information. Sometimes, you go through their website. Sometimes you go through their social media platforms. Sometimes you're just guessing the emails based off of, their, their like where they write for. So yeah, it's kind of just a lot of sleuthing to try and find these people's contact information, but it works.
It does work, and it's amazing, the way you'll find somebody. But I mean, sometimes it's just finding someone that knows them as well. Like you can find some of the best contacts are, when we interview authors, finding out. They'll say, I don't know anyone in the media. And it turns out that they have a cousin who works in the mailroom, who works at NPR, or they went to school with, and that is really actually super helpful, because if we email someone and we say, hi, we're reaching out on the recommendation of your colleague, even if it's not a close colleague, it's still going to get a second look where it didn't before. And coming back to your point, Carol, about authors reaching out, I mean, the fact of it is everybody gets too many emails. And when an author reaches out, it's a real turnoff for them, because there's no there's no separation. There's no objectivity to, if an author says their book is great, there's nobody that is going to listen to that. It's sad, but I mean, it's part of the deal. There has to be somebody in between, or they have too many emails to get through. So it's really difficult as an author to push through that wall.
Also, if you're dealing with books that are coming from publishers, big or small, in a sense, do you feel that book has already been vetted?
Oh, definitely. That's why self-publishing is so difficult. Because even when you have there's a few, not many, but there's a few really good hybrid presses like She Writes and some other places that are doing a good job of it. But overall, even when you have a great book that's self-published, there's so many pieces to it. You're going to have a horrible cover, or you're going to have a terrible title, or you're going to have a bad marketing program. It's just nobody can learn all of those pieces. And it ends up being the whole package just isn't going to fit properly in a world that's really saturated with books. There's a lot of books. It makes it very difficult to have something where one piece isn't quite right.
It does. And I was wondering, I thought, now, I'm lucky because I stumbled into it having a literary agent. But someone mentioned to me that if you don't, and it's hard to get a literary agent in a lot of cases, that a publicist is the next person who could really help promote your book. Would you agree with that, or is that a fallacy?
There are a number of small and presses, not medium so much anymore. Like they almost all need agents, but there are a number of small presses that take unagented submissions. And that doesn't mean it's easy to get them published. Like it's still really difficult to get a book published. But yeah, we work with unagented authors for sure. There's lots. And when you're talking about a small press, I mean, agents certainly also place books in small presses. The margin for making money on books is low overall in every house, but the margin for making money in a small press is really low for an agent. So, I mean, that's kind of another whole topic of the economics of publishing. But yeah, if the question is, do we work with unagented authors? Yes, for sure. There's lots of small presses that take unagented submissions.
Interesting. What would you say? Let me throw this one to Julia first and come back to Jess. But what are the skills or talents that a good publicist needs to have? What's required of you?
I would say that a good publicist definitely needs to be a people person. Just because I think a lot of our job is really forming relationships and being excited to kind of talk to new people. And, we do kind of a lot of, pitch meetings. So we'll be in a meeting with like an editor at the New York Times, for example. And, a lot of it is, being personable and being kind of someone who isn't just sharing, regurgitating a book, a description. You want to kind of, give it, have a personality and make them remember you in a certain sense. I think another skill is just being tenacious, being kind of someone who I don't want to say don't take no for an answer, but, there's a certain kind of like, how can we pivot here? How can we kind of turn this into something that, isn't 100% a no? If someone's not interested in one book, they might be interested in another, kind of offering other options, kind of offering kind of a different avenue if something's not working. I think someone who really enjoys kind of thinking creatively. I think a lot of our job is very creative. Every single book is different. Every single author is different. There's definitely a way for you can, make a really unique campaign around an author based on their journey, their, exactly why they're writing, what is the kind of inspiration there. There's so many avenues and so many different directions you could take that, which requires a lot of outside the box thinking. And it's a really fun job. If anyone's, thinking about getting into publicity, I think there's a lot of fun that you could have too. But yeah.
Cool. Are you having fun, Jessie, with it?
Yeah, I am. I'd say like the skill set is similar. On my end, I'd say where it is a little different is if you want to start a company in publicity, you also really have to be an entrepreneur, and entrepreneurial qualities are somewhat overlapping, like the tenaciousness for sure, like some taking of chances. And then that team building aspect. So for me, like what is really important is being able to find out who is better at the things that I do than me. So, there's a lot of very careful work that goes into media list building and researching and things like that. Some of that I'm great at, some of it I'm okay at, but I've found a team where I find someone that's better than me at all the things that I don't do, which is a really satisfying task as a leader. And I love that. And also building out a company into like leaning into the things that people are interested in. So one thing that's really led my company is when I see somebody working on stuff that they super enjoy doing, like say I have a publicist who's a fantastic publicist, but they love design. Why not also add a design element into our company? So we now, do web design, we do cover design, we do that kind of thing as an extra. And that's really led my leadership there. So I'd say I have the skill set of a publicist, but growing the company into a larger company is really part of that entrepreneurial skill set, which really does demand a lot of kind of acrobatic thinking and flexibility and things like that are exactly how pitches are designed. And what Julia said about, you don't want to be the guy who doesn't take no for an answer, but you do want to be able to say, oh, you don't do middle reader, you don't do new adult, but it sounds like we have this other thing that is exactly what you're interested in. And then also making sure, it's little things like when often we get no response when we reach out. But if we have someone reach out and say, no, I don't want that, that's like an opening. Like most people would see that as a not opening. But for publicity, you're like, oh, look, they responded. Here's a new friend, So we get to say like, well, what are you interested in? And, that those kinds of relationship building things are really useful and helpful. Oh, and I'd also say reading and being contemporary. Like the amount of people that we talk to where we ask what their favorite book is, and I'm going to go ahead and say that, well, actually, I won't typify the person that says this, but the number of people that say like either Shakespeare or like William Blake or like something like that. And I'm like, no, I mean, last 3 years. And they're kind of dumbfounded. And I'm like, wow. So what that tells me is you didn't grow a lot from your college or high school reading. Like you are kind of stuck in a place where you're not reading new authors and letting that kind of growth happen. And I think when people read the classics, they think it's sort of profound. And what I see is sort of a lack of growth. So we're really looking for people who are able to read contemporary work and are interested in being good literary citizens.
A good literary citizen. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that's a really important thing for our company, for sure. And it's something we talk to our authors about a lot because it isn't Machiavellian to say that this is going to help you. It's like it is good for the industry, but it is also good for your book.
What are you going to say, Julia?
Oh, no, I was going to agree for sure. And I think a big part of publicity too is, being very up with the contemporary media or book kind of landscape. So that's across the board. For example, like Jimmy Fallon just started a new book club, probably this year. So that was something that publicists on my team, that's something we need to know about, because we need to know like what he's reading, who is the contact to like pitch those books to, because it's constantly changing, the media landscape and the book landscape. So, what people are reading, is there a new editor who is, now just reading political books? Like that stuff we need to be aware of. So it's definitely part of publicity to kind of be up on everything, kind of constantly be up on trends, who's the new person talking about books. That's all stuff we need to be very aware of.
That could be a bit overwhelming from my point of view. Like it's great to work on that as a team because it's impossible to really know everything. But I mean,
exactly.
It is kind of funny how often people are like, when you talk about what their hopes are for their campaign, and they'll say being on the Oprah Winfrey Show. And I'm like, hate to break it to you, but
that's tough.
Yeah. No, but I mean, people really have very old goals that aren't applicable anymore too. So kind of filling people in on the kinds of placements that could happen, or like what's happening now. The Jimmy Fallon thing is a perfect example. But yeah, I mean, there's always new stuff. There's always old stuff ending. It's changing all the time. And then just the literary influences of our time too, like whose voice is like really interesting and captivating right now.
I feel validated. I'm reading the new Jen Psaki and the new Kevin Kwan.
Oh, nice.
But last week, I attended my first ever book club meeting. I'm a voracious reader, but since I could read, it was the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. Thank you, Julia. They have a book club, and my book was their July selection. Awesome. So I got to be in at that meeting where all these people had actually read it and had comments and questions and things. It was so interesting. I may attend a book club meeting at my library branch just because I thought, wow, that's a whole new set of perspectives.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if I'm an author and I have a book, but not a big publisher, if I'm, I don't know, coming out of the blue, how do I find you guys? How do I find a publicist? And I think you had said you'd look for somebody if you've written about history, if it's a memoir, if it's a mystery book. But how would I research that to find a publicist for a book if I'm not coming from a publisher?
I mean, I think that search engine optimization sometimes speaks its mind. I mean, if you Google book publicity and go down, you'll find, you can see who's been quoted in what articles. That can help. Getting a referral is usually the best, though. I mean, if you really don't have a literary community, then that can be kind of challenging because there's some not great people out there. But I mean, I think most of our work comes from referral. I don't always know. We get a lot of outreaches, but we try to maintain a presence at some literary conferences and things like that. But we do a lot of outreach for public speaking and things like that. So I mean, we're sort of a known quantity. Yeah, but there's great other book publicity companies around. I don't think we're very, the larger book publicity companies aren't super competitive with each other, as far as I know, although I just noticed someone was using my name as a keyword, which I thought was really funny for their company. Yeah, I was like, cool. All right. Well, that's really funny. But
being in the crossword puzzle, right?
No, but it is funny. Like, I'm like, okay, well, that's a keyword, but no, I don't. I mean, I think people should work with a great company that also feels like a good fit, because I mean, there are numerous book publicity companies that are good, and you just want to make sure that you're working with one that feels like it's meshing with you, and that they have experience working on the types of books that you have, and working with the team that you already have in place. Those are all really important things.
It's been an extraordinary experience on my side, because I really had never thought about having a book published. And then once you put all that work into it, and you think, is anybody else going to actually read this? Or is it going to mean anything to anybody who might read it? And so everything Julia's done and all the directions she's pointed me in and things she's arranged, it's really given me a new respect for that whole operation. And I know too, as a creative, that management and business and promotional skills are not always part of that package. That's where a lot of creative people really hit the wall. It's like, okay, now what? I made the thing. But dealing with, I had never realized that it was as specific as publicist for books, which now, of course, makes total sense to me. But, well, do you guys we have 2 minutes left. Do you each have a recommendation for authors, wannabe authors, closet authors, thinking about being an author? What would you say?
I think for me, I always want to encourage authors to put as long of a timeline as possible. And I'm assuming for Julia, your timeline's more locked in, but I'd say if you are looking for an independent publicist, start looking a year before the release, because we really want 6 months at least. The timeline for Publishers Weekly, Library Journal, all those guys is really early. So we really want to start working on the media list and then have our press kit all put together before we do submissions. And they have hard deadlines. So to get this kind of advanced press, you really need to start early. You cannot really start too early, because we all want to build in these little pillows of time. Everyone's job on your team is to never be late. So being early to start with is a great way to go. So I would just encourage authors to, the worst calls that we get really are, my book came out yesterday, I'd really love to do some publicity. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. That is just so sad. It breaks my heart every time. So anything I can do to get people to kind of line up that timeline to work for them is a great way to get going.
Thanks. Cool. Julia, what are your words of wisdom?
Yeah, I mean, I think to Jesse's point, we do definitely have more of like a set timeline. So yeah, we're getting kind of the things, we're pretty by the book in terms of how early we start working on a project. But yeah, I think my advice is, going into your book and publishing your book, I think a lot of what publicists are going to ask you is like books that you think are similar to your book. What kind of media are you looking to get? Are you interested in doing like interviews? Are you interested in writing original material? So that's like an article and a personal essay, things like that. So, thinking ahead in terms of kind of what you want for your book, kind of getting out there and kind of looking through the landscape and kind of books that are similar to yours, like what kind of publicity are they getting, just kind of, being aware of kind of what books that are similar to yours are kind of getting and having expectations in that way, so that when we do come together and meet, there's, dialogues that we can have and things that, I'm also very happy to kind of, I do get a lot of first time authors, and I think it's definitely daunting to have, just being plunged into this space. And I think it can be helpful for new time authors, debut authors to just, go out there and see what, who's writing about books and what type of, what's out there in terms of publicity.
Yeah.
Wow. If I wasn't already inside of that, what you guys just said made me realize how I would have to come into it. I mean, you're really better off coming in with your bios and you answering some of those questions before contacting a publicist. So you're not asking somebody to start from ground zero. It's like,
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, thank you both so much. That was really valuable. Everybody I know has a book in them, whether they've started one, written one, or they're just thinking about it. I mean, I don't know if that's part of the human condition or not, but I was very glad to know like the steps. So thank you so much. I hope you may both come back maybe after the new year, and we'll talk some more about this, because there are just so many authors looking for that path. Well, thank you both. And we will be following you on social media for sure. And I look forward to hopefully having you back.
Thanks, girl.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was fun.
That was. So, well, please join us again on Producer's Toolbox. And all of you people still thinking about that book, get busy. Thank you.